So now that we've learned a little bit about Python variables, let's talk about a key concept that you need to understand when working with variables, namely data types. In Python and programming in general, we will be working with different kinds of data. We will be working with text, decimal numbers, tables of data, images, sounds, videos, and all sort of data. And programming languages like Python will categorize this data. In other words, different kinds of data like text or decimal numbers and whole numbers will have a different category, meaning they will have a different data type. So for example, if you try to put a decimal number where Python expects to have a string, you'll often find that you have a problem. And let's say you want to divide two things together, and those two things are actually numbers, 10 divided by 5, then you are actually good to go. But if one of those things is actually another kind of data, like a home address, which is actually a string, then you're going to have a problem and the program will crash with a type error for trying to evaluate an integer with a string, which doesn't really make any sense. For the most part, Python takes care of data types behind the scenes. And let me show you how you can actually see the data types in Python. Because we can ask Python what category something belongs to by writing print, then type, parentheses, and then putting something in between those parentheses. So for example, if I write type 50 and run the code, then you're going to see that the type of this whole number is int. And int stands for integer, which makes sense, right? But let me introduce you to quite a few other types. If we also say type 50.5 and then run the code, then we get to see that decimal numbers are classified differently. Decimal numbers are classified as floats or floating point numbers. And floating point numbers are the type you will usually be working with every time you are dealing with numbers that have a decimal point. Now, let me show you the type a text is called. So I can write type, and then in between the parentheses, I'm going to open the single quote and add my name. When I run the code, then I can see that the type of text is called str, and str stands for string. However, you can think of the word string as just a piece of text or sequence of characters. And the way that you can tell that something is considered to be a string is by the fact that strings are always surrounded by either single or double quotes. And as you can observe, the VS Code editor is actually very helpful with the syntax highlighting, so that the Python code that is considered to be a string actually has a different color. So in this case, strings are marked as green. So now the question arises, how do data types relate to variables? And what's the connection between the two? Well, if the data type has some certain type, so does the variable containing the data, because after all, a variable is just a container. So for example, when I create a variable called my age and assign its value to 20, so let's actually see the type of the variable my age. I'm going to type print, parentheses, then the type of variable. And in between the parentheses, I'm going to supply my age variable and then run the code. As you can see, because my age holds onto a whole number, then the data type of the variable is int, which as I mentioned earlier, it's called integer. So changing the value of my age variable to, let's say, 20.5 and then running the code once again. So as you can see, since my age variable holds to a decimal number, which is 2.5, then the type of my age variable is now a float. Finally, when I rename my age variable to my name and then set its value to the string Shuaib, then also instead of my age here, I'm then gonna pass my name variable. And when I actually run the code, then I can see that my name variable is actually a string. So let me ask you this. How do you think we're gonna print this statement exactly using Python? One thing to keep in mind is that this statement has single and double quotes in it. And this is the mystery we're gonna be exploring over the next lecture. But I want to throw this to you as a challenge. Can you try to figure out how to print this statement on the screen using Python? So I need you to give it a go. And in the next lecture, we're going to look at the solution. I'll see you there. Take care.